I trust TikTok with way too much things. Primarily recommendations for things like movies, music, and books. However, I'm starting to learn that maybe that last one should not be a thing I trust TikTok with. I recently read a book that was all over my TikTok For You page, and that book in question is on my Kindle. The book's name is Credence by Penelope Douglas, and I kind of regret reading it. And by kind of, I mean very much so. So let's discuss. The book starts with our main character, Tiernan, who is a 17-year-old girl, and I would just like to clarify 17. Uh, learning that her parents had taken their own lives after her dad had been diagnosed with terminal cancer. Um, Quite a sad start, you know? I was like, geez, already get me into the tough situations. This is going to be an interesting book. The parents are clarified to be very famous, very successful, quite wealthy, and I don't think it's mentioned straight away, but neglectful to Tiernan. Um, but because of their status, uh, specifically Tiernan's mum had a personal assistant. And this personal assistant is, comes up to Tiernan as Tiernan is staring out at this, I believe it's a tire swing, hanging from a tree in the backyard. Um, and the personal assistant is like, "Hey, Tiernan, did you know your dad had cancer?" And she's like, "No, I didn't." And then the personal assistant was like, "Damn. Well, your parents are now dead, and in their will, they gave up custody to your dad's estranged stepbrother who lives out in the wilderness. So you can either go with them or you can stay with me. But if you stay with me, it's going to be a huge legal battle." And Tiernan's like, "Well, God, I don't want that. So I'll just go and stay with my cousin and step uncles, or cousins and step uncle. Sorry." So Um, she moves to the wilderness, which is where her uncle Jake and his sons, Noah and Caleb, live. Um, they live kind of up a mountain, and it's clarified from the very beginning that in, I believe it's said like 6 months' time, from the beginning of the book. So it's presumably around like June, July-ish that the book starts, that they're gonna be snowed in. Apparently there's so much snow that gets up onto this mountain that they can't even get down to the town. So, everything that she needs stock up on before the snow hits. And she's like, "Okay, kind of weird, but okay." So, you know, her uncle Jake takes her around the town and then finally up into the house. And there she meets her cousin Noah. And Noah's kind of a dick, but ultimately, you can tell he has good intentions. And he just wants to make life easier for her, um, while still going, "Hey, it sucks living up here. You want to get away as soon as possible. Why the hell did you decide to move here?" Because Noah and his dad have a very kind of rough relationship. They don't really get on. He, as in Noah, does the work around the house to appease his dad, but ultimately he wants to get away, wants to do, I believe it's motocross, um, as a full-time job, and just wants to live anywhere else. So Tiernan is exactly the opposite. Tiernan knows what it's like to live in the spotlight, and she doesn't want to, go through with that anymore. So um she is happily like, "Yeah, no, I'll do it exactly what you say. Muck out the horses, um, take care of the dogs, everything to do with all of the animals I'll happily do, except hunt. So one day, as Tiernan is, I believe, doing her laundry in the middle of the night, the front door bursts open, and in comes this guy who's covered in blood, and he has, I believe it's a dead deer slung around his neck, and he's just dripping in presumably the deer's blood. Um, and he sees Tiernan eventually and begins to sexually assault her. To which Noah eventually finds them and is like, "Whoa, Caleb, stop, that's your cousin." And then Tiernan's like, "What the hell just happened?" And Caleb's like, not Caleb, sorry. Noah's like, "Oh, that's Caleb. He gets like that after he's been on a hunt because he's hungry." Girl, what? What the fuck? So yeah. So apparently Caleb gets hungry after a hunt and needs to take out that pent up frustration without consent. So that's kind of who Caleb is. Caleb also doesn't speak. It's clarified that he hasn't spoken since his mum abandoned him in a car at the age of around 4 years old. So, fair enough. He's got trauma. Completely understandable to be mute for that. None of the characters in this book are good. None of the characters in this book are nice people who I would happily spend time with. Tiernan's probably the best, and even then, you're sat there sometimes like, what on earth? Like, why? What possesses you to do this? But yeah, so, like I said, Tiernan's 17 years old, and, it it's interesting. There's some interesting situations that come out of it. There's this one scene before she turns 18 years old. Keep in mind, she turns 18 around 45% through the book because I read it on the Kindle, and Kindles tell you the percentage, and I believe it was around 45%. So yeah, there's a bit in the book where her and Jake, as in her uncle, are very like, they're like grinding on each other pretty much, and eventually, just before it gets like, you know, worse, Jake's like, "Whoa, stop, we can't do this." um and Tyrion's like, "No, why, I want this." And yeah, it's um and then she turns 18, and there's a scene on the couch where the two brothers and Tiernan watch movies, and then they watch her until Jake interrupts them. I hated reading this book. I hated reading this book. Like, genuinely. Um, I'm not gonna spoil what happens, just in case you want to ruin your life by reading this book. But, long story short, at the end of the book, she gets with one of the three men, um, who I believe the youngest is Noah, and he's like 20, I want to say. Um, or 23 maybe? I don't know. Either way, he's nowhere close to being Tiernan's age. Yeah. All throughout this book, I was thinking, God damn, Caleb needs to be in jail. Like, straight up, he does criminal things. Like, he genuinely, like, needs to be in jail, or at the very least talking to a therapist. But that doesn't happen. But yeah, Tiernan ends up with one of the men, um, and has a child with him at the end of the book. Um, and it's eventually I can't remember her name and I can't be bothered to go and look, but the the mum's personal assistant, she is very much a case of she essentially brought Tiernan up. So she really wants to make sure Tiernan is okay. And so she keeps calling and calling and making sure she's okay. And eventually she finds out what has been going on between Tiernan and Jake and Noah and Caleb. And at first she's like, oh my god, that's disgusting, you know. They forced you to do that. Like, they are disgusting creeps. But by the end of the book, she ends up with one of the others who doesn't end up with Tiernan. What happened to them being disgusting creeps, you know? um but yeah, this book is certainly interesting. Um I think the biggest issue I had with it, and this might not seem like an issue to some people, is genuinely the fact that it's it's so well written. Um, what I mean by that is Penelope Douglas is genuinely a good writer. Like, she understands how to portray what she wants to portray into words, and it works. And the name Credence actually, has a lot of meaning for what goes on in the book. Like, it's not just a random name. And I've read one of her books before, and it was okay. It was very much the same kind of, or at least very similar, kind of plot point in terms of. Well, no, actually, it was very similar in terms of it was a smut book that TikTok loved. Uh, and I was very neutral about it. But this one is, I just can't stay neutral about it. I'm sorry, Penelope Douglas, you're a great writer. But oh my god, it pained me. It pained me. Um, yeah, so I just like to, once I, actually, let me get up Goodreads on the computer. I would just like to, kind of, um, go through some of my favorite, uh, quotes from Credence by Penelope Douglas. Uh, so the book literally starts off with a Frederick Douglass quote. Uh, which, sure. Um, and there is, I surprisingly highlighted a lot of, um, quotes from this book. But yeah, so, um, there's one point where Caleb, because it goes between point of views, um, but it's primarily Tiernan's. Um, and there's one point where it's on Caleb's point of view, and Tiernan is having night terrors, which is a big plot point. I won't spoil too much, but Caleb comes in and is like, "They're such deep sleepers. They don't hear you at night. Just me. When I touched your face, you quieted. When I tried to leave, the nightmare started again. So I stayed. I come in every night. You took your cold feet between my legs and I hugged you to me, resting my hand on your back and feeling your body calm as it nestles into me. Do I make you feel safe? I like taking care of you." And it's just kind of exactly what it. Exactly how you describe Caleb's character. He's weird like that, and it's interesting, yeah. Um, yeah, so eventually Tiernan, uh something happens with Caleb and her, and she leaves, and she leaves Colorado and goes back to LA, and eventually Noah shows up. He's like, "Oh, it was time. Um, it was time to to speak to you. Oh, by the way, my brother and dad are here. Um, and then Caleb speaks for the first time. Uh, and it's wild. Honestly, it's kind of wild. Um, but yeah, like I said, the biggest issue I have with this book isn't the fact that it's an incest swap book, which I mean is a big plot part of why I don't like the book. But it's just so well written, like, and that upsets me because if it wasn't, I'd at least feel justified more in why I don't like it. But yeah, so ultimately I rated the book about, I think it was 2 stars I rated it. Let me look. Yeah, I rated it 2 stars on Goodreads. Um and yeah, it was interesting. Uh I yeah, I don't know what else to say about it. It was interesting, that's for sure. Um I mean, if I had to summarize it in a few words, let me summarize each character in a few words. So Tiernan, a literal child, traumatized, you know, um, needs actual family. There, just what's that? 7 words that cohesify my thoughts on the book. Uh, Jake. I have no words for Jake. Jake is just needs help. Jake needs help. Same with Caleb. Needs help. Please go to jail. Noah is probably the second best character in the book, and that's simply because he doesn't really make Tiernan feel pressured into anything half the time. Um, in fact, there's one point where Caleb does something really, really messed up to Tiernan, and when she finally escapes him, she runs into Noah's room to seek comfort. So, Noah is ultimately the closest thing to family that Tiernan has. And it's still a really messed up relationship. And that's really all I have to say about the book. Like I said, if you want to spend your own time reading it, go ahead. Nobody's stopping you. Personally, I didn't enjoy it. You might be different. But it's one of the things where you should definitely read the trigger warnings beforehand. Penelope Douglas has 40 books. I don't know if they're all as well written as this. I know that Punk 99, I want to say it's called. Let me look. I know that Punk 57 is, you know, probably one of the better written books that I've read, that has been recommended to me by TikTok. But um, ultimately I still don't love it. Yeah. But yeah, thank you for watching this rant, I guess. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like. Feel free to subscribe. I am currently trying to reach 100 subscribers. We're very close, so any little helps. Also, I stream practically daily over on Twitch, so if you'd like to join me over there, the link is in the description. I'm currently trying to reach 1,500 followers. And yeah, I'd really appreciate it if you joined sometime. Yeah, have a fantastic rest of your day, and bye-bye.